Sorry I started a little late, but I'll make it up. We'll go over a little time too. Okay, there's the biggest class I've ever seen. You're all not asking questions. Yes. Do you have it printed out? Let me look at it. See which one you got. This is a really, really, really good question. So my fans out on the internet, I'm sure it's worldwide now. Um, non-refundable deposit. It's very confusing, you guys. There is no official form. The MLS does not have one. When I've talked to the MLS, they are very clear. Like I said, the last forms update, I said, why do you have one in there about non-refundable? Because everybody's doing it. And they said they're not going to touch it because it's a loaded gun. I know I'm promising forms are coming. They are coming. I've actually been talking to our lawyer, Sean, a lot last week, and we've actually been hashing this one out so we can have our official form here soon, along with a couple others. It's about fitting him in between all the other work that Ben has him doing. But anyway, so I know it is coming. The problem is when you do a non-refundable deposit, you need to make it not earnest money. Agents who write in their contract, upon mutual earnest money to be released to seller, to buyer, and it will be non-refundable. Well, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's what I mean. Okay. Buyer to release to seller upon mutual acceptance, earnest money, and it will be non-refundable. You write that in your contract. You you have a loaded gun ready to shoot you down. Because a lawyer will come in and say, we don't care you said it's non-refundable because the contract and other parts of it says it is. And what it says in the contract is going to override anything you wrote because you would be practicing law. See what I'm saying? Lawyers can't even agree on it because there's all sorts of loopholes all over your contract that says escrow is refundable if this happens. The argument is, well, what if they've waived everything, right? True. But trust me, a lawyer can still argue it. So the best way to do it is, let's see this one, because there's just a few there I've posted, and basically the forms you're seeing there, they're forms that have been written by John L. Scott, Windermere, other brokerages by their lawyers. So I feel like if they're saying it's okay till we get ours, it's probably okay. But it doesn't mean it's perfect because everyone's trying to come up with a solution and nobody's agreed on the proper solution. Other than, like in this one that you just presented to me, it says, uh, seller listing broker acknowledge receipt of the deposit. Basically, what I want, okay, that's an okay one. I wouldn't use this one. Let's just not use that one. I'm going to pull up on my computer here really quick. Because I do have, because there's like 3 of them on there, I think. There's more than one, correct? That's on the intranet? Right. Mm-hmm. Right. No. And so I'm going to tell you the one I use and the one I would prefer you use of them. I'm just pulling them up or I have them. Till we get one. And the one we're getting is going to be along the same lines as this one. Come on. Okay. Buyer agrees to release the earnest money to the seller after deposit with escrow. Immediately upon release of the earnest money, the release fund shall become the property of the seller and a non-refundable deposit applicable towards purchase price, and it's no longer earnest money. If this transaction fails to close for any reason other than the default or breach of this agreement by seller, said non-refundable deposit shall remain the property of the seller. Nothing in this paragraph requires a firm or closing agent to release funds that have not become available from buyer as liquid funds. So basically that's saying until the funds are liquid, escrow can't give it to the seller. It also says that once they get it, you're no longer earnest money. We're agreeing this is no longer earnest money. Now it's just a non-refundable deposit. So this is to say to lawyers who say, well, over here it still says you get it back because it says refundable. It's like, well, yeah, it does, but they agreed this is no longer earnest money.
Are you saying that they're
They're releasing it whenever you decide, is however you want. Some people release it after mutual acceptance because they want their offer stronger and put that money in the seller.
is this becoming really, and again, I apologize, I know the answer, but is this really common? Is that what I have to do?
I would say more and more you're seeing people do this, but since Greg is here, Gibbs, who reviews contracts, he sees it more than me. I mean, Greg, are you seeing a lot of contracts making it non-refundable release of earnest money? You see it? Yeah. I mean, it's like you need to be able to explain to your buyers all the things people are doing out there because in the end, it's their decision, not your decision. Don't be an agent who says you've got to do this or you're not going to win. You might say, look, you'll be stronger if you do all this. I know that people are doing this, but you need to know what the risks are and you need to be doing it in writing so that they read it and that you're not doing it verbal. Because what happens is if you release it and this happens, then suddenly the lender says, oh, we need an extension of 5 days to close. Is there any leverage there to make a seller sign your 5-day extension? No. That seller's thinking, wait, you just gave me $35,000 earnest money. It's a hot market. I think I'll just keep that $35,000 and we'll just go back on the market and sell probably quick. Right. And now, guess what? Your buyer's furious at who? You. And that buyer's gonna like say, you made me lose earnest money. And that buyer may talk to a lawyer, and then that lawyer is gonna start looking at your contract. That lawyer is gonna start saying, did they advise you? Did they tell you the risk? And then we're gonna get a letter, and I'm gonna ask you the same questions, and you're gonna say, well, yeah, I talked to him about it. And I go, well, guess what? You have no proof that you did talk about it. You have no proof that you made it very clear that these are your decisions and you're not recommending one over the other. Yeah, great. Yeah, I mean, yeah, right, right. And I have said that before. I'll say it again. Yes, yes. Your .loop file is there for 7 years. You need to put in there all the kind of stuff you need because computers, emails, they'll be dumped at some point. You know, I go back and look for emails and I go, I know I wrote this 6 months ago, and I'm like, damn it, where is it? And I can't find it. So I like to get in the habit of if you advise them a price opinion, make a copy of the email that shows you all the information you made a price opinion on and throw it in their .loop. But if you're doing anything that involves risk and you're explaining risk, you know, send over this information and say, you know, here's all the things buyers are doing. Here's the risk involved if you do it. It's your decision. Talk with your lender too. Please let me know that you got this so I know that you've actually read it. Boom. They reply back, yes, thank you very much. Boom. Make a PDF, throw it in your file. Then if it gets to the point they lost their earnest money, you have proof. You didn't tell them to do it. All you did is advise them as to what people were doing and the risk, and that, in the end, it's their decision, not yours, and that you will go with whatever. I have buyers that won't do everything. I buy in Seattle a lot. It's very brutal and much, much more competitive. And it is more common than not that the winning offers have waived financing. They do not have a Title 22T. They have done pre-inspections and waived all of that. You've crossed out paragraph W to get out on that. And you've released the money and it's all non-conditional. Done. So basically, the buyer signs and they lose their investment if they don't close, period. There's no way out. They have no way to back out at all. And that is more and more common in Seattle, in the inner city neighborhoods right now. I've already sent it to you, Perul, the verbiage. The earnest money one? Yeah. What do you mean the pre-inspection? Okay. I am happy to share the template that I send to all my buyers, explaining all the things people are waiving and all the risk. I recommend you get in the habit of sending it to your buyers after you've shown them houses a day or two. It kind of scares your buyers away if you send it to them with your buyer disclosures the minute you had your meeting. It will freak them out. Let them go see a couple houses first. Get a little excited. Then you present it, have them reply they saw it, because now they have time to, one, talk with the lender, make sure they're getting a full underwritten loan as opposed to just a normal pre-approval, so they feel more confident if they choose to waive financing. And two, when you do go write the offer and you say, okay, now let's talk about how you want to structure this offer to be most competitive, they're not feeling blindsided, like pressure to waive all these things last minute because they had no idea. It will make it so much easier for you to work with your buyers. It is not uncommon to have your buyers lose on a couple offers before they start going, we get it, and now they start waiving. Yeah. Well, I know you do because I taught you to do that. Okay. So let me give this back to you. Is that answering your question? Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Um, One thing I want to make clear is don't recommend or de-recommend anything. Your job is to teach them and educate them and let them make a decision off of what they want. Yes, I mean, I have clients that are first-time buyers too, and I tell them, if we're down on the wire and they can't do a pre-inspection and there's not an inspection offered with the house, I tell them, we're down to the wire. I can't pull an inspection together in the next 5 hours when they want the offer. So, are you comfortable waiving it, not knowing anything on it, or do you want to just leave it in the inspection? Same with earnest money. I just say, hey, this is what people are doing in some search situations. If you're comfortable with it, let me know. If they say, well, what do you think? I'll say, it's not what I think, it's what you want. I'm just saying, yes, you have a much more attractive offer if we do this. Yes, there's risks, but I'm not going to say it's a guarantee, and I'm not going to say you should or shouldn't. Because because it's your decision. I'm here to help educate you, teach you what people are doing. Here's are the risks, but it's in the end, it's going to be your decision. And my job then is to take that offer and go in and make the argument that you're the best one for them to accept. Don't be an agent who gets in the habit of saying, don't do this, do this. Oh, this is what I want you to do, because now you are setting yourself up for a lawsuit. Because suddenly you're presenting yourself as the expert, and we know it's once we take it on and present ourselves as the expert, we better know what we're presenting and saying, because you can be held accountable. You are licensed, we have laws we have to follow, and you need to be very aware. So that's why I would never waive this earnest money. I would never say you have to waive your earnest money. What I do to help my buyers along the path, because I don't, when I get a buyer, it's great if we get the first offer and we're accepted. I'm like, thank God. But it's rare. We all know that right now. What I do is I always make sure the next day after not winning, if I hadn't talked to the seller then, I'll call them the next day and track them down. And I'll just say, hey, can you tell me what about my offer made it not the winning offer? Are we not waiving things that someone else is? Because generally, those agents are going to be nice to you and they'll probably just say exactly why, because they're not telling you the price or the terms necessarily. They're just saying, well, yeah, you guys had an inspection and you didn't release earnest money and you had a financing addendum. And the people that won waived financing. They released us the earnest money and they waived inspection because they did a pre-inspection. That's really powerful to go back to your buyer. You're not saying, I told you so. You're saying, hey, I followed up. I found out there were actually 8 offers and the winning offer did these things. It's good for us to know for the next time when we go write an offer. That's all I say. You know, you writing an email, you guys, can be very powerful to your clients because they get to see it and absorb it. It's easy when you talk to them to forget. It's easy for them to make a quick reactionary response. But when they see facts in front of them, then they think about it. And if they're a couple, they'll talk about it. And you might hear a whole new story about how they want to write a new offer the next time. Okay? Yes. Again, the question is what percentage of earnest money do you release on mutual? Oh, I don't even know. The question was how many offers I write a month and how many the percentage who would release earnest money. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. And I certainly wouldn't be quoting that to anybody. I would not even waste the time looking at your offers and seeing that to tell anybody. That's just an opinion. And I would be careful saying 50% of the people I work with waive this and get in a house. Yeah, yeah. As far as I know, no one's tracking numbers on who's waived or not waived on earnest. Okay, 22T title report. All right, let's talk about that. People get really confused as to what 22T does first. Because when you look in your first 5 pages of your contract, it says in there up front that title has to be free and clear of all encumbrances if able to close. Because basically, your lender will not loan if there's any kind of lien on that title. The only lien they will allow on that title is because they know they can't get past if taxes aren't paid. Automatic lien goes on that one. That's the usually IRS or state or whoever. But yeah, that's the only one that can actually get above a mortgage. But they want to know that when it closes, that Their lien on the mortgage is it. There's no credit card debts, nothing left over from the seller. So it is the seller's responsibility to clear up title before you can close. And that says it in the first 5 pages. 22T is totally different scenario. Because with 22T, best time to use, okay, 22T is used when you talk with a buyer, and let's say your buyer says, I want to build a garage out back that's big enough for me to put all my tools, run my business, because there's huge open lot back there and there's an alley, and this will be the perfect little house for me in Ballard. You better throw a 22T in. Because don't say your client, oh, that's great, you could build a garage out there and run your business. You don't know. And do not take it on to find out. The buyer takes it on. Because if you take on to your buyer and say, well, I'll research this and I'll find out if you can build that, and you don't talk to the right people and you assure them they can, and now they close and they find out they can't, you will be sued. Because once again, the law is real specific in law of agency. If you take on a task, it is expected that you're the expert handling that task. So things like that, you want to say to your buyer, you know, you need to contact the city, you need to find out the zoning, and you need to find out if they would allow you to construct that and run your business out of there. This was a true story. That agent had a 22T. They found out they could not build and use the garage like he wanted, and he wanted out. They got out because they had a 22T. 22T, basically, you put your timelines in. You always want to say the buyer shall have, their 5 days from the date of receipt of commitment of title insurance. Never say from mutual acceptance, because what if they don't give it to you? What if the listing agent doesn't send over to you a title report within the first 5 days? Well, you're done. Right. So you always want to check that box. What people aren't realizing, though, is every time you get a supplemental title update report, 22T reactivates. Every single time. Because every time you get a supplement, your client should be reading it and seeing if there's anything else now that popped up in title that might not allow them to use the property as they intended. And that's the key. 22T is about you being able to use the property as you intended. And if suddenly something came up in title and it says, oh, you can't build anything above 35 feet height, and it's a 2-story house, and your guy was planning to put on a 3rd story, so you got a view. Well, wow, that's above 35 feet. Well, now you can get out on 22T because you send your form over saying, there's this cloud on title. Seller, you have so many days to have that removed. Otherwise, we will walk away and we get our earnest money back. That is the difference. We understand 22T, because let's say if you didn't have 22T, same scenario, you want to build a 3rd story, finds out he can't. Well, guess what? The title mentioned in the first 5 pages is free and clear of all liens. You can close. Sorry you can't build a 3rd story, buyer, but we're free of liens. It says so here, we can close. 22T, though, says, well, no, I can't use it as I intended, so therefore I'm out. So if you got buyers talking about major things they want to do with a property, I would seriously consider throwing in 22T. If you got a buyer who's buying a cute little house and they're just like, oh, I love it, we're not planning on doing anything, we may remodel the kitchen one day, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Having a 22T is not going to be maybe necessary, and it'll make your offer look more attractive. Okay? So does that answer your question, Brittany?
Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
we know it's going to be.
Yeah.
Because that's covered.
Yeah.
Too.
Mm-hmm. Right.
3rd story.
Right. So guess what I do? They see a property. I always ask them, "Hey, do you have any plans for the house, the property?" They're like, "Well, no, why? What do you mean?" I go, "Oh, well, just curious. Like, are you thinking down the road you might want to take the roof off and go up, or you thinking you're gonna like blow out the whole back end of the house and go back 20 feet? Because if you are, then I think I need to put a 22T in, and I need to explain to them why, and explain to them that while we're going through the process of closing, they better go talk to the city and find out if they can do all that." Okay, great.
Could you walk through the flow? So you put a 22T on behalf of the buyer as part of the, then what is the workflow? How does the workflow look like? The buyer, what happens?
The workflow when you do a 22T is every time you get those emails that say, "Oh, here's a title update," you better make sure you're sending that to your buyer and telling them they better read them every single time to make sure that they're happy with that, what it's saying, and that they can do what they want. If they said they're going to raise the roof and put a third story on, you better be telling them, "Hey, we have this 22T we can get out on if you can't do that. But you, buyer, need to go find out, can you permit and do that with the city?" And if they say, "Well, can you help me?" You go, "No, I can't. Because you need to be talking with these people because these are the people you'll be working with after the contract closes, not me. So you need to make sure that they agree with everything you want to do before we close, so we know this is the property you can buy."
So also, great. So also, you said that you as an agent get email.
Title. You all, I mean, every transaction you're in, you guys, title is continually sending you emails throughout the whole transaction, right? Those, every one of those is a little attachment, and it'll say, "Oh, here's the next update on title report." Because what they're doing is they're researching the title on that property to the beginning of time, or whenever there were records. So they're going back 100 years, whatever, and they're looking at all the reports, everything through history, because there could be something that got put on title 40 years ago that's not clearly written on current preliminary title, and they just find it and they're like, "Oh, we just found something. It's red flag, red flag." Okay? Great. No, Greg was next.
Um, common on the east side, in addition,
Yes.
that may have.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Greg brought up a good point that if you're in, especially east side, you're in a residential community that has an HOA. Well, one thing they should be doing if they want to raise a roof is not only talking to the city, but they better be talking to the HOA as well, because the HOA rules will overrule. If the city says that you can do it, but the HOA says you don't, the HOA will probably win. Okay? Question.
Remember the form says 5 days from the buyer receipt.
Yes. Yeah. Always check that box. You never want to check the box for mutual acceptance. Okay? Oh, wow. Okay. 7 people. Are they asking questions? Yeah. Yeah. But that's okay. I know where this is going. You don't. You do not. Okay. The question was sellers will show, "Oh, here we have title report attached to the listing. So if you want to use 22T, put in 0 days." Well, guess what? They're You just waived 22T basically, because every time you get a title update from the preliminary they just shared to closing, this timeline begins. But if you have 0 days, that means every time you get a title report, your buyer has no way to say, "Wait, something came up on title," because it says I have 0 days to call it out. So you just effectively canceled it. So why you might as well not put 22T in. Okay, so no, you would never put 0 days. This is not a one-time contingency, folks. This is a contingency that continues throughout. The 5 days, every time you get a report, re-triggers 5 days. No. Yeah, I mean, those are agents trying to push through their agenda, and if you're not smart enough to catch it, right? You know, these agents who say we require all the following things to be done to accept an offer, right? They're just asking. Doesn't mean you have to. Your buyer can have any offer they want to be presented. And an agent who's making a list of, like, here's the following requirements, better be careful because they could be sued later, that listing agent, after closing, because a lawyer could come back and go, my buyer wasn't allowed to do the due diligence they wanted to in purchasing this property because it says right here the listing agent refused to allow us to do it. So therefore, you, seller and listing agent, you're being sued. So I don't like it when I see requirements to writing an offer. Well, I'm talking about something else, Peru. I'm just saying it's out there and I've seen it. Okay. Are we done with 22T? A lot of it comes down to asking your buyer what are they going to do with the property. You know, let's say if there's a wetland in the property and they're saying, hey, I want to build like a big old shed out in that backyard near that wetland, I would put in a 22T because there's laws about how you can be close to a wetland and they may not be able to build the shed out back. Hmm. Right. It's not uncommon that people don't put 22T in. Basically, you guys, you probably will 95% of your contracts really you're just doing normal deals, and a 22T you can throw in if you like, but it probably won't ever be used because most of your buyers are just buying a property as is and they like it and they may remodel. But you do get people that want to do major things, you better put it in. Yes.
How does that involve with
A 22T? You could throw a 22T on vacant land because you're going to get updates, right? But if you're buying vacant land, you need to ask the buyer right up front. Rather than 22T, what they normally do are feasibility studies. And they'll put out 60 days, 90-day feasibility study, and they'll be talking with their contractor or whoever, and they're going to be finding out, can we permit, can we build what we want, and all that. Can we put in a septic and all that? Because there was a situation recently that someone bought vacant land being sold by the neighbor. They parceled it off, but they made the parcel too small just by a fraction for them to come in and build a septic tank because there was wetlands. They got out because they had a 22T. No, wait, they didn't have a 22T, but they got out because they learned all this before the feasibility period was up. So they just said, sorry, we're out unless you move your property line back like another 20 feet of your existing property, then someone can build here and then we'll continue. Your choice, seller. And I don't know how it got resolved. But so vacant land usually has feasibility studies. Who? Oh, feasibility studies are 15 days? They're whatever, how many days you want. Right. And if they're going to put you in a time crunch on a feasibility, let's say instead of 30 and 15, you have a serious talk with your buyer. I mean, if your buyer's a builder, they already have contacts. They might be fine with a 15-day feasibility because they can figure things out. But if you've got a buyer who says, I want to buy vacant land and I'm going to get a contractor and I'm going to build, I would say to them, have you already got a contractor that you've talked to that knows that you're going to do this and they're going to help you? No. Well, you better get one fast, buyer, because during that feasibility, that's when you need your contractor. And that's not when you're interviewing contractors. that now maybe you decide later you don't want that contractor, that's your business. But you better already have a contractor you're talking to, because that contractor can make sure in the feasibility study they can build a house and put in a septic if needed or whatever, because they know the permitting process and they know the zoning laws. Okay? All right, I think that answered 22T. Any other questions? Go ahead. Yeah. All right. That's a good question. So it was a competitive offer situation. Seller got a 65B rent back, probably living there free, is my guess, till like June 20th. And your concern is now, what if the buyers go and find out that during the period from closing till when the seller moved out, they broke something, like a fridge or whatever. And I can tell you other scenarios. Sellers taking appliances with them suddenly at the last minute. Sellers at the last minute saying, oh, our deal that we thought we were going to close fell apart, so we're not going to move out now on the 20th. We're going to stay until we find a new house. There's lots of really creepy scenarios like that out there happening, folks. And guess what? They're going to call you. You're the buyer's agent, and they're going to say, hey, we have our movers, we have everything, we have nowhere to live after the 20th. Those sellers have to get out, or those sellers need to buy us a new fridge. Guess what, folks? They are now a landlord, and that seller now is a tenant. There's no longer buyer-seller relationship. It's a landlord-tenant situation, and that landlord has to follow by the book whatever the tenant laws are, because the lawyers, legal, everybody are very firm, and they will always go in favor of a tenant following the laws. And that means if you suddenly have to evict them to get them out, it's not like you can go over there and strong arm and get them out. They're protected by tenant laws. It could take months. And I can tell you, in an eviction process, I would hire a lawyer who knows how to handle evictions, because, like I just said, if you do not cross your T's and dot your I's perfectly throughout the whole process, that tenant can flip the switch and make you go clear back to day one of starting the eviction process over. You need to let your buyers know when they do a rent back that they are now a landlord and they're a tenant. You need to ask really clearly, why does this seller want to be there? I mean, I have a seller right now. They have a rent back to July 25th. But I explained to everyone the reason we won is she wanted to finish her teaching contract, have time to pack up the house before they moved to Chicago, because her husband already has a job there and he's working. I told I would tell buyers there, I doubt you're going to have a problem with them getting out. But if they, let's say in your case, take an appliance or break an appliance and fix it, and they call you, what are you going to do? You have no leverage. You have no clout. You have no authority. Period. Your relationship with that client ended the moment that contract closed. Your buyer agency duties are done. They're a landlord. They need to deal with their tenant. No, nothing extra. But they're going to expect extra. So as a courtesy, you could say, well, you're a landlord now and they're the tenant. I can email the listing agent and see what they say, but I need to let you understand, buyer, there's not much I can do to force it because the contract closed and I have no authority to enforce this. And send the listing agent, see what happens, see what they say. The listing agent may not even respond. I'm sorry, you're a landlord. Tenants sometimes mess things up and you're stuck having to deal with it when they move out. I don't know I have no clear answer for you if the appliance is broken, other than maybe you bought them a home warranty. And if you bought them a home warranty and the appliance is broken when they moved in, the home warranty will come in and deal with the refrigerator. Okay? Does that answer your question? Anyone asking questions online? No? Okay. Yes.
I have a question. The financing addendum.
Yeah.
So I'm getting stuck on sellers that terminate. It's just not clear for me in terms of the seller asking us what if they know like what. You can say yes.
Okay. All right. You just asked me a lot of 22A questions. All right. There is confusion on 22A, Section 3, seller's right to terminate. So, if you leave this blank, that means 30 days at day 31 after mutual acceptance, the seller has a right to send over 22AR, and it says, I, seller, request you, buyer, to waive your financing in the next 3 days. If you do not waive your financing in the next 3 days, I, seller, then have the right, if I choose, to cancel this contract and give you your earnest money back anytime I want, clear up to closing. That's what this is about. There was confusion lately where some people were thinking whatever days you put in there, let's say 20, that on day 21, that their buyer now is automatically just waived financing. No, they don't. This does not mean buyer has automatically waived financing. The only way this can happen is the seller sends over their phone demanding you waive it. If you get one of these letters, and it's rare, but they do go out, it does happen, then you need to sit down with your buyer and explain to them, one, we can waive financing, no problem, and move forward to closing, and this will lock the seller into the contract. Seller's right to terminate, folks, is the only out a seller has, really, in a contract to try to get out from selling their house. And this is the way they do it. Because if you don't waive it, then the seller can go, phew, great, let's not sell the house. We don't want to move. We're out. Here's your earnest money. Okay? It does not mean you automatically waive financing if they never send you the letter. All right? Does that answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, no, you can't answer it. So when you put on your contract and you put the days, don't be a foolish agent and leave it blank and then put in a 30-day close because, well, it might work if you have a stupid listing agent who does, oh, yeah, we'll close in 30 days, and they have a 30 days where we can send the right to terminate. Well, the seller now has no opportunity to get out of the contract if they choose because closing's 30 days, and at 31, now I can send over that. See what I'm saying? As a listing agent, I would say if you have a 30-day close, I'm going to put in 20 days because I want to know I have time to get out if I want to. As a buyer's agent, I'm going to say if I have a 30-day close, then probably I'm going to put in here at day 25 or day 20 because I want it so close to closing that if we do get the letter and we're forced to make a decision, that they can have a talk with their lender and they're so close to closing then the lender can probably sit down and go, I feel confident you're going to close because all your conditions have been met. We're going through it's out of underwriting, we're going to docs. Well, then it's not so scary for the buyer to waive it to keep that seller in the contract. I also, if I got the letter, would immediately call the seller, their agent, and say, why are you sending us this? I want to know. Because sometimes they'll say, oh, I'm just doing it because it says we can, and I'm just trying to tighten up the contract to protect my seller. Okay, that's a whole different story than if they call them up and they go, well, yeah, we want to do this because sellers just wants out because they just don't want to sell the house now. They've decided they don't want to move because he's not getting the transfer they thought. Or if they say, well, because we just got a backup offer in and they're offering us $50,000 more. Because if you hear those stories, then that's a seller who's going to probably use their right if you don't waive. to get out of the contract and do that other. And you want whatever information you can get before you say to your buyer to make a decision. Because if you know they have another offer, you know he isn't getting the transfer and they just want to stay here, your buyer's probably going to seriously be considering about waiving financing because they don't want them out because they know they're going to get out. Whereas if they just say, oh, I'm just doing it, I want to tighten it up, blah, blah, blah. Well, great. Then maybe it's not as important to your buyer to worry about them trying to terminate the contract and just say no. Okay, so that makes sense about timelines. So what was your next follow-up question on 22A?
Financing, what's at stake is just the earnest money, right? And the house.
If the,
But I
well,
mean,
yeah.
So
If the,
if financing isn't secured, but they're still confident in it, they're gonna waive, and it falls through, and you want the earnest money.
yes,
That's it.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. The question was if the buyer feels confident that they're going to close, they waive financing when the letter comes to move forward, and now they're up to closing, and the lender says, I'm really sorry, we can't close on the loan because we just found out you bought a car, and now your debt to income ratio is over the top, and you can't fund it, or you just lost a job, we can't fund it. In that case, they waive financing, they would lose their earnest money. Okay? Is there another question on 22A? Who? You cannot sue a buyer to perform on a contract because the contract states if they don't close, they lost their earnest money unless they have a contingency that allows them to get out of the contract. Well, you can sue buyers for lots of things, but I don't think you can sue them because if their lender says I can't close on the loan, why are you suing to make them close on a loan when you know they can't? It makes no sense. See what I'm saying? Right, but then the contract states if you've removed all the conditions, the risk to the buyer is they lose their earnest money. Period. Period. Unless what, Greg? Right, which nobody does. Yeah, that is true, Greg. On page 1, it says, do you want a forfeiture of earnest money or seller's elected remedies? Well, if they check the seller's elected remedies, then the seller could come in and say, well, no, there's more damage than earnest money, I'm going to sue you. But if you check forfeiture of earnest money, and the buyer just doesn't sign docs or doesn't close, they would lose their earnest money. But on the flip side, if the seller suddenly says, I'm not going to sign those docs and close, you better be telling that seller they need to talk to a lawyer because the buyer could sue them for performance of contract, and they better get some legal advice and not just your advice about refusing to sign docs and sell. Okay? So what was your next question on 22A?
I think I'm good now.
Oh, you are? Okay. You have one? Okay, did you have a 22A? I want to wrap up 22A. Yeah. You can say you could put in your contract at 34 saying, buyer agrees that day 20 in the contract they're going to waive financing. So you've already agreed, but there is an actual form, a new form that came out last year when they did in February when they did forms, and it's 22. Let me see here. Known as. Okay, financing appraisal loan. I think let's see, it's on 22AR now. You can use 22AR and you check a box and just sign. It says buyer waives the financing contingency set forth in 22A. You can send that over in day 20. All right. I think there was another form about this too. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's nice that you verbally told me you're going to waive it on 20, but as a listing agent, it better be in the contract that you're going to waive it on day 20. And then you would send that over. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because nothing more. Don't go with that automatic, okay? There is also 22AW, limited waiver of financing contingency addendum. And if you sign that and send it over on day 20, it says buyer waives the financing contingency in 22A, but is keeping in paragraph 7 appraisal less than sales price. Will survive the waiver of the financing contingency. So that's when
22 AW.
AW. So 22AW, when you would use that is, let's say you're writing up an offer and your seller or your buyer says, you know what, Eric, I'm okay waiving the financing part of this. I'm not worried. I know I'm going to close, but I don't want to waive the appraisal because I want to keep that in. Well, to do that, you could use a 22AW and put that in. Or you could say, oh, well, let's just not put 22A in and let's put in 22AA, which is the appraisal addendum. Okay? 22A question? Okay. Wait, you just lost me. You're not talking 22A. You're talking, wait, you're talking, you want to waive a portion of the appraisal? You mean, no, it's 22AD, you mean additional deposit? Is that what you're talking? Yeah, you don't want to raise the appraisal completely, but you want to retain part of the appraisal? Right, and it comes in 30,000 under, right? So what is, no, you didn't tell me what you're waiving. So you're, right, you're waiving financing and but you want to do a limited appraisal waiver, but it doesn't make sense when you say to me, the next thing is the appraisal came in 30 under asking price. So what did you waive in the limited appraisal? Are you saying your buyer is willing to bring 30,000 only towards a low appraisal, but they don't want to do anything above? There's a form, it's 22AD, additional deposit, and it says right there, buyer will bring blank additional money to make up a difference between a low appraisal and purchase price. That's the form you use to do that. Okay? All right. Are we moving on from 22A? Yes, we are. Yes, new question.
22A, but on the other side of the page.
Oh.
Appraisal less than sale price.
Mm-hmm.
On 22A, already we have the options. What is the difference between that one and double A? Waiving?
Okay.
That's it?
Okay, the question is paragraph 7, 22A, and then 22AA, the appraisal addendum. They both say the same thing, right? You don't use a 22AA if you have a financing addendum because it's there. You're just repeating twice.
Unless you're waiving.
But if you say you're going to waive financing, but you want to keep appraisal in, you could throw out 22A, not even have it, but put in 22AA, so you have that appraisal condition. Or you can put in 22A and then use the 22AW limited waiver where it says we're waiving the financing page 1, but we're keeping in paragraph 7 on low appraisal. Okay? Is a limited waiver of financing. All right. Okay. You have two options to waive financing and keep appraisal addendum. Okay? Option 1, you don't put in 22A in the contract at all, but you include a 22AA appraisal addendum. Okay, that's option 1. Or option 1, option 2, same thing. We want to waive the financial part of page 1, but we want to keep the page 2 appraisal in. So option 2 is you put 22A in your contract, and you put a 22AW in your contract, which says we have waived page 1 of financing, but we retain the protection of low appraisal. Okay, does that make it sense? So there's 1 or 2. Those are the only ways, okay? Yes, Robbie.
What if we wanted to keep the
Okay. Okay, there is no form that says you can waive appraisal but keep in financing. If you cross out paragraph 7 and send in that you have waived the appraisal, but you're keeping the financing portion alive, you have not waived appraisal at all. All you did is waive the way a seller responds to you on a low appraisal, because right above it, it still says under earnest money paragraph that if you cannot close on the loan, which you cannot on a low appraisal, they will get their earnest money back. So if you want to keep in 22A and you want to waive appraisal, the best way right now would be is you better put it on Form 34 and say, buyer is waiving paragraph 7 and the right to, no, excuse me. You want to put on a Form 34 that buyer is waiving the appraisal protection stated in 22A. If appraisal comes in less than value and buyer cannot close on the loan, buyer acknowledges they would be losing their earnest money because they're getting out on the appraisal, period. That's kind of like waiving it. But there is no specific language for it, so make it simple.
But if the
Yeah, if you got a stupid listing agent, and there are stupid listing agents who says, look, we like your offer, but we're going to cross out section 7 on page 2 of financing because we want you to waive appraisal and you're representing the buyer, I would say, go for it. Yeah, we'll sign that. Love to sign that. Yeah, you think all you want that I just waived the appraisal protection, you fool. You're the reason why I'm a successful agent and I get referrals and you'll be out of business here in a couple of years. Because that listing agent does not know their contracts and they thought by crossing out paragraph 7 they waived appraisal. And their seller thinks that. But guess what? When you get a low appraisal and you throw it in their face, that seller and that listing agent are going to be pissed. And they're going to be pissed at the listing agent because they didn't know the rules or the laws or the contract. But I did and you do. Okay? So does that answer? Yeah, and it happens, folks. There are listing agents who think that. And don't think I haven't written an offer before, crossed out 7, and sent in my contract. And I told my buyer, this is what we're doing. We're not waiving their appraisal. We're just waiving the way they answer to a low appraisal. And I said, let's see what the listing agent does. And I've had listing agents, sellers sign those contracts right away, thinking I waived it. And I'm like, they're stupid enough to accept it. Not my problem. Okay? So that's why you really want to know your contracts, folks, inside and out, so you can see it when you have a smart agent like me coming at you, setting you up. Okay? Next question. Come on. Anybody, throw a hard one at me. I really want to be stumped. You have an easy one? What? Are you talking on condominium? Okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I am. All right. Line 13, charges, assessments levied before but due after closing, assumed by buyer, prepaid by seller. On a residential property without an HOA, what they're talking about here is a sewer capacity charge. If you're buying any kind of home that's built within the last 10 years, you better be reading that Form 17 and see if they check the box that they still owe sewer capacity charge. Because that's a one-time tax. Yeah, I would say within the last 10 years if it was new property. So right now, anything built from like 2006 on, probably, I would be making sure is that capacity charge paid. Because it's a one-time tax that's charged to new construction.
The county lets them pay it over.
Right, and the county says you can pay it all off at any time you want, and if you do, we'll discount what you owe. But if you don't, then we'll charge you on your utility bill, probably over the next 10 years, so much money to pay it off. And so you will get lots of sellers who don't even know they have it because they forgot and they're paying their utility bill. And I'm their listing agent. And I'll say, do you owe a capacity charge? Well, I don't know. No, I don't think so. Well, I want you to look at your utility bill and see if there's something on there. Because if so, you got to contact the city and find out what's left. Because as a good listing agent, I want to know the dollar amount before I even list it. Because if they're really towards the end and it's a $600 left, I'm not worried. Yeah, but they have to look it up. You don't look it up, they do. But if you find out, I still owe $5,000 on this, that's a big negotiating thing. Is who's going to assume $5,000? Because if you check the box assumed by buyer, that means that whole $5,000 now is going to be a responsibility of the buyer to pay out. If you say prepaid in full by seller, that means the seller now has to pay the $5,000 off out of their proceeds, so your buyer doesn't owe any money on the capacity charge. That's what that means on residential. On condominium, though, what this means is there a assessment, special assessment on the property? Has it, because you'll have condominiums where a unit will have like a $30,000 special assessment, and the seller may not have paid it off yet. And if you check to assume, then that means the buyer is going to take over the $30,000 special assessment on the condo and pay it off. So again, big negotiating point. Okay, first of all, your Form 17, the seller has to answer a question, are there special assessments? That's first place to look, right? On a condominium, when you get a resale certificate, right, you get the resale receipt. The resale of the receipt is the only thing you ever look at in a resale certificate. Don't ever read the rest of it, period. You do not advise a buyer ever if a resale certificate's good and they should close. That is their responsibility, because once again, if you take on the resale and say, it looks good to me, don't worry, you just took on responsibility of saying you're the expert at reviewing resale certificates and that they can rely on you to give them the correct information. You never read them, but you do read the resale receipt. It's about 4 pages long, and that just answers some standard questions that the association does. And in there, it will have a question, are there special assessments? And you do want to look at that, because sometimes they will pop up there as special assessment, and they never told you on Form 17. And if you don't catch that, then your buyers will be finding out after closing they owe it. So you can look at that. But when your buyer says, please read this 300-page document and tell me what you think, and I know there's agents out there who will read them and advise them. They'll say, oh, these financials look really strong, blah, blah, blah. What you need to be doing is tell your buyer, actually, you need to review it. You should have told them before they even got it that they're going to have 5 days and they have to review it, and that they need to review it sooner than later, because if they have any questions, we need time to get you answers. And you can help them to get them answers. You can figure out, when you get a resale, you should be saying, listing agent, who are all the contacts that my buyer can ask questions on the resale certificate? You should be on the 3rd day saying to your buyer, have you read the resale certificate? Do you have any questions? Have you asked them? Have you got answers? Because you have leverage within that 5-day period to go back to a listing agent and go, hey, my buyers asked a lot of questions and we're on day 5 and we had no answers. So I got this little addendum here saying that we pushed the resale review period back an additional 5 days, and your seller better sign it and get it back to me by 8 p.m. tonight, or we're walking away from this deal on the resale certificate because he's not going to buy it without answers. Because you have leverage then. But after the 5th day at 9 p.m., you've waived automatically the resale review period. So if they don't have all the answers they want, tough luck. So that's the kind of thing. You're watching a timeline, making sure answers are getting to your buyer. Okay? No. Charge and assessment. Do you take on the task to find out, or do you take on the tell your buyer to figure it out? I wouldn't tell my buyer to go figure out there's charges and assessments. I would be reading Form 17 and say, well, Form 17 says there's no capacity charge. The seller is supposed to tell us the truth. If you want to know more or you're concerned, we can call escrow and ask them. Because once escrow has a contract, they can find out if there's any sewer capacity charge. It happens. They make mistakes. And you got to decide what you're going to do. If you come back to me and say, hey, you didn't check the box about charges and assessments, so now you got to send over a brand new Form 17 with that box checked, I probably won't. Because if I redo it, Form 17, and send that box over there, guess what? You have 3 days now with the new Form 17 to walk away. So I'm not going to do it. I tell my seller, we can do it if you want. There's risk if we don't. You need to get legal counsel on that. Don't rely on me. Ask a lawyer what they would say about not redoing it. But I'm very clear, and you guys all need to do this if you're a listing agent. Read the Form 17 when they check the boxes. Read it. And make sure they've done all the boxes. Make sure they didn't check a box that you're like, huh? I mean, I had recently a seller who checked a box and they didn't understand the question. I was like, you just said there's an issue with the foundation. Is there really an issue with the foundation? No. Why do you mean? Well, you checked the box that there is. Oh, I made a mistake. Great. Let me resend you over Form 17 and let's redo it. There's a lot of bad, stupid listing agents out there who don't read Form 17. They attach the document, and then smart agent Eric comes along and reads it and goes, what is wrong with the foundation? Oh, by the way, you didn't answer this whole section. We need to know answers from the seller before we even write an offer. Yes.
So I have a question on that 17 spots for the buyer to sign. One is acknowledging and one is waiving. If they
There's actually 3.
What is the third?
I'll tell you. Go ahead.
Oh, but if they sign waiving it and something was incorrect, like saying that there was no charge or something about foundation, is that still binding? They waive the why or the incorrect information?
If you waive, you waive. Doesn't matter what they said.
Even if they said there was no charge and it turned out there was.
Yeah, because you waived it. When you sign the first section of Form 17, all you're saying is we're acknowledging we've been given Form 17. When you sign 2, buyer's waiver of right to revoke, you're saying, seller, we are waiving the right to be able to walk away from the contract over the next 3 days. Period. Doesn't matter what's on Form 17 now. If you check the third box, that says buyer's waiver of the right to receive a completed Form 17. And you'll see this a lot of times in bank-owned properties. They'll have a Form 17 and they'll have every line crossed out. And then they'll have circled or starred that your buyer has to sign 3, buyer's waiver of right to receive a completed Form 17. And the banks will say, we won't look at an offer unless you do it that way because we know nothing about the house. We can't fill it out. We're required by law as the bank to do a Form 17. So our Form 17 is we know nothing, and you're waiving the right to receive a completed one. Okay? Great. Next question. True. Yeah. Yeah, we're working on one for ourselves. I cannot guarantee you when we will get our own forms, period. This is all about squeezing my little needs in between all the other big issues that the legal department is dealing with. I thought I sent that to you. You asked me. Right, and I sent it to you. Yes, I do have language. Yeah, I have language. If you have a listing and you want to do a pre-inspection that you're offering all buyers, I have language, and I'll share it with anybody who wants to ask me to email it to them. Absolutely. And again, like I said before, this is a form that other lawyers have written, so I feel okay with you using this language. I think Windermere's the one who wrote this, and you will see it, but now I want to give you some advice on how to use it, because there's something you need to think about. So I'm just pulling it up here. Okay. Seller procured inspection. All right. If you do an inspection, right, and you want to share it, and you didn't hire a home buy, do not attach this inspection report to the listing like your Form 17. Why? You have no idea who's looking at it. You have no idea how to advise your client as to, are people doing pre-inspections? Are people really interested in the property? If another agent calls you and says, well, what's the feel out there? How many agents have asked for that inspection? So we got an idea of how many might potentially write. I don't know. I attached it to the listing. No one's called me. What do we call that listing agent? Stupid. What you want to do instead, take this language, attach it to your listing, and in your agent remarks, you will say, seller has inspection free to offer any buyer who wants to see it. Please fill out attached form on listing, email it to listing agent, and we will email you the inspection report. Now you know how many people are looking at a pre-inspection and might write, correct? And what this says is, remember, it says here, seller is given or is giving buyer a copy of the inspection report dated blank concerning the property. The report is intended to be part of Form 17 that is provided in this transaction, whether or not the two documents are attached to each other. The inspection report was procured by seller and is provided for informational and disclosure purposes only. It is not intended to constitute a warranty, either express or implied, about the condition of the property. Buyer is advised to procure their own inspection from a professional inspector chosen by buyer or hire the inspector that prepared the inspection report. Buyer has the opportunity to inspect the property of buyer's satisfaction. You know why we put all that language? It's called liability after closing. Buyers are suing sellers after closing where they had an inspection report given to them by a seller, and now they moved in, and something horrible happens to the house, and that inspection report didn't say anything about it. And guess what? Courts are saying, yeah, that seller is liable because it's reasonable for that buyer to read that inspection report you gave them, that it was a qualified inspector that would obviously catch all the things they needed to know. So what this language here just says is, one, we're not preventing you from doing your due diligence. Because if you're the kind of seller who says, no, no one can do a home inspection, you just use the one we provide, you just prevented them from doing their legal right of due diligence, so you can be sued. Two, it just says as part of Form 17, it's just a disclosure. We're not making any claims about this house. This protects your seller. And if you have your inspection attached to your listing and this attached to the listing, most, you're just giving the inspection report out to everybody, but you have nothing signed first that the buyer's aware of all of this. And what if they don't throw it in the contract and you sign the contract? That's why you want to control the inspection and giving it out by making them sign this first. It's no lot different than saying you want to do a pre-inspection. Great, you send over a 35P. Okay? The buyer has to sign this before they get the inspection report, period. That's why your seller has pre-signed it, you filled it out, and you have in your remarks, please sign attached document for inspection report. Once received, we will email you the inspection report, period. Now you have it in your hand. There's no argument whether this buyer signs it or not or read it. Okay? We're working towards getting our own, but in the meantime, I'm totally comfortable with people using this. And if it's not in the intranet, because I don't know, I think it is, you can always email me. I get emails all the time from people asking questions like this, and I shoot them right back to you with a copy for you. Okay? We still have time for a question because I started late. You can't leave. Just because I came late doesn't mean you get to leave at 3. Oh, just because you want to show a house, you think you want to leave 10 minutes early. Well, I guess that works. It works. If you really must leave, you can leave. But I can answer more questions. Any others? Okay, you don't. A seller who says, I have a pre-inspection and I will not allow inspections will be sued. Okay, if you have a buyer and they have an inspection report they shared, and your buyer says, well, I still want to get my own inspector inspected, and then you call the listing agent and they say, no, you can't. And now you get the house, guess what? Your buyer could sue that seller for horrible things happening in the house that they want, probably, because they can say, they did not allow us to do our due diligence. We requested to do an inspection and they refused to allow it. Guess what? The court's going to say the seller broke a contract. You might win. Did this really happen? Well, I don't think so because a lot people are being told really quick. No, no, most people. I mean, if you have a listing agent who says you cannot inspect this property, you can only go with our inspection. I would just say that listing agent, but my buyer wants to. Well, no, you can't. I'd say, do you realize the legal liability that you and your seller are taking on? And then they might say, well, what do you mean? I just say, it says in the first 5 pages, buyer, do your due diligence. Make sure you know everything about this property. And you're just saying now, I can't do that, but legally the law says we can. you're setting your seller and you up for a lawsuit that then if we, anybody buys this house, not even me, anybody, and it closes and anything is wrong with this house, and if it's major, they can come back and say, we weren't allowed to do our due diligence. How do you know that inspector identified every single thing that was really majorly wrong? They're not perfect inspectors. Okay? Did I answer that question? Okay. Any others right now? Oh my God, you mean you have no questions at all? Oh. Oh, thank you. Anything from the people out there? Any questions? Yeah. Okay, well, I guess I got off 10 minutes early. All right, we'll talk to you guys later. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Yeah.
And I did send you email again.
Okay, I'll get it to you.
Both of them, like the language for risk